Well, I wasn't quite sure I understood it all. It'd be good, huh? When is the lectureship?
February.
Coming up February?
21.
The 3rd, 24th is just the lectureship.
If you can do that, even on just a Saturday, that's Gary Habermas is going to be. So that'd be a good excuse to get together with everybody right there. But that doesn't take away from your point that we should have some parties, or something.
The 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Now, the 25th is when it's on a Saturday, but if you're going to go to the class, you can pick up 2 credits by going Thursday night, Friday night, and then all day Saturday.
Here at the class.
And the class will be here. So, he's going to be teaching on Jesus, history of Jesus, and Seminary, more or less, and then the Da Vinci Code on Saturday, and he'll finish it up with a question and answer time. But before that, he's also going to be talking about resurrection. So,
He's a specialist on the resurrection, isn't he? What do you mean by the class will be here?
well, we have a class, and he'll be teaching for 2 nights. He'll be teaching Thursday night, Friday night.
And that'll be here?
Yes, students will be they can take the class.
Oh, okay.
And there's 2 credits for that class.
Okay.
And then they have to go also all day Saturday. And the book,
The Historical Jesus.
The Historical Jesus is the name of the book. That's a book you'd have to read.
And I ordered it.
And that's it's just a 300-page book. So
You remember who it's by?
In between house and class.
I haven't seen all this thing.
Where's the Saturday thing?
That's at Morningstar. It's right straight. You can go right straight down I-5 and take the cutoff, Kugler cutoff, and it's right there.
Right.
So it's easy to get to from I-5.
What town's it in?
Salem.
Oh, Salem.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
so
on the other side of South Salem.
it'll be south of here then. Yeah.
Go left.
Cool. All right, that sounds very good.
Where do you go out? There. I'll be on home. You go out.
There's also going to be a introduction to theological research class that's going to take place in March. And that, if you've already taken that class, the introduction to theological research, you can take it again and it won't cost you anything. But if you haven't taken it, then you should take it. And it's just a 1-hour class. Friday and Saturday.
Good.
When's that one?
March sometime.
7th and 8th, I think. I think it's the 7th and 8th. If I remember.
Dr. Grover's coming.
You learn how to write papers. It's very good.
Wow, very nice. All right, take your quiz and trade it with somebody else's. So, no quid pro quos, that'll get you in trouble. You've heard about these quid pro quos happening. Yeah.
Quid pro quo wasn't so successful. We had staying power phrase, quid pro quo.
That's pretty funny. That wouldn't become a cliche if it weren't so successful.
Absolutely.
What was the guy's name? Abramoff? That sounds like a Hebrew name, doesn't it? Abramoff? He was into some quid pro quo. That didn't work for him.
the many politicians who seem to be quick to discount money.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't get any money from him, and I'm not giving it back, somebody said.
They were who?
All right. Who is the best in here at doing the Hebrew alphabet, at writing the Hebrew alphabet? Who's the best?
She's got awful nice handwriting.
Is that her? Sure.
Yeah, she did. Really good.
My wife is really good too. If you don't care what direction it goes. You mean you didn't even get it backwards? Oh man.
They're all the right order though. It's just left right.
Oh, that's a hoot. All right.
A lot of people can't write the alphabet backwards. I think it's impressive. Right?
Okay, well, do you mind coming up and writing that on the board for us, that Hebrew alphabet? Yeah, that's right. Well, if you're up here, we'll give you grace and help and all those happy things. Oh, we're going to have to get you a pen. What color do you want? You can pick your own color and everything. You can pick big or little. Sure. Starting from the right. Oh, look at that. Is that good or what?
Looks like yours.
Yeah. Each one a work of art. Hurry up.
3 down, 19 more to go.
You forgot one.
Try your dollar. I'll take a little dollar.
Yeah,
See the television closing in and all of that.
It's been a long 2 weeks.
you're on 10.
Yeah, she got
Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin. Zayin, Hey. Hey. There you go. Oh, now that's a good lamed right there. See, that's the test right there. When you do a good lamed. You got to have that cough more rounded because that almost looks like a noon there. All right, there you go. Very good. Name. Oh yeah, found it. Yeah.
Assuming you guys right. I see it. I remember that.
Oh, see, there's another. She's good.
I don't know. I got what you put across the house. Yeah, I should have gone away.
Very nice. All right, now let's have Kim come up and do the final form because you've already got to go in the right direction, so she should be okay. Thank you, Sherry. That's very nice. Come up and do the final forms for us. There are 5. Oops, somebody didn't put the brown cap back on all the way. We'll let you pick your own color. Purple. That one was not all the way either. That might not work. Let's see. Okay.
It was a fun class.
Oh wait, no, this one has a
Final make.
right?
Yes. Got to have the tittle on there.
Yeah.
Final Sigma.
Sigma.
Final Sigma.
Okay, very nice. There's the alphabet. So that's worth 30 points. Obviously, there are 22 letters. Well, if you do the scene thing, you can do that if you want. You don't have to. But there are 22 letters with 5 finals, so that's 27. So you get 3 free points there. So when you grade this quiz, make sure you take the number wrong off, right? Because you get a few free points here and there. Well, at least there you do. All right. So 1 point off for each letter that's wrong. If they did the whole alphabet backwards, take a point off for that too. Boy, that's gracious, isn't it? You can go grade it in the bathroom and look at it in the mirror.
You know what I just learned doing the alphabet? I can now spell names backwards.
See, there you go. When you're looking at the ambulance coming from in the mirror, you can read it.
You know, I can honestly say I've never tried that before or since. So I would.
All right. Indicate whether the following vowels are short, changeable long, or unchangeable long. Segol.
Short.
Short. Kibbutz. Short. Kametz. Changeable long. Hirik Yod. Very good. Sere. Changeable long. Okay, very nice. Each one of those obviously is worth 2 points. Here's where you get some bonus points. Give the 4 typical noun endings: masculine, singular, and plural; feminine, singular, and plural. What would those be? In fact, who's good at writing noun endings? Anybody good at writing noun endings? Adam, you good at writing noun endings? Huh?
No.
Did you get these right?
I got it.
No?
I think I got the masculine singular right.
That's tough because is it ending list or blank?
All right. Well, Adam, pick somebody else to do this noun ending thing.
I don't know if we're just pointing to Carl.
Carl.
I do love that. You can't follow directions the same.
Yeah, that's the masculine plural. Masculine plural is eam. Yeah.
You know that good. Well, your dog is
Good. That's the here has to come before the Now that's the masculine plural.
And then you
Can you help him, Jerry?
No.
No?
Yeah, got it too.
Yeah, you gotta have a comment before the day.
So what are his
That's a little T. That's a little T. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And then just write blank on the left of that masculine. To the left of the masculine. All the way to the left. All the way, yeah, just over there in that space, write blank. Yeah. Just go over a little bit and just write the word blank. Okay, there we have it. There we go. Masculine, singular is blank. The masculine plural is eam. So you have the eam, you have the Carrick, and the Yod, and the Main, like that. So they're really in three different spots. And then the feminine singular has got the comets and the hay, like that. And the feminine plural has the oat, like that. Can you see that?
We'll get extra points if we wrote the dual endings.
You get extra points in heaven. Extra points in heaven. Not here. Instead of all, that's extra points in heaven.
What I did is I put the top.
Because your top column is but then you put another
Visible by 4.
put the top.
Each one of these is worth 2 points. You can get 1 point off of that. All right, now, the form of the definite article. Anybody pretty good at writing the definite article? Adam, can you do this one? Almost. Then yeah, that's where you go. Now that's a pretty beefy potok you got there. There you go. Watch that class. Very good. I get Sherry back up here to do the writing for you. All right. Yeah. Hay with the potok under it and a doggish forte in the next letter. All right. That's worth 5 points. Boy, that's pretty heavy duty there, isn't it? 5 points. All right. Number 5. Why are inseparable prepositions called inseparable? So, see, there's a why question. We try to avoid those, but here you go.
Just wrote a cell phone number down.
You got phone numbers floating through your head on that one. Huh? Anybody tell me? That's right. They're joined to the noun or the object. Lots of ways you can say it. They must be attached to the front of the next word that is their object, or something like that. All right, let's go around the room and do vocabulary. And if you would like to pass, you may pass. If you pass, we will in no way think that you don't know the answer, but that you're just shy and don't want to do it. No, well, no, you don't know the answer. All right, so let's start over here with Kimberly on L. To toward. That's right. Very good. To or toward.
How is that spelled different than the other words for God?
Well, there's a tsere under Ao for God, but sometimes it's spelled similarly. Ka or ka.
According to.
Okay, according to, like, as. Okay. Bait. The preposition bait.
Okay. In, by, with, against.
Okay. Nice. Coal.
Oh, that me?
Down, yeah.
Sorry.
Now you can count and look it up in the back of the book if you need to.
It's all, each, every.
Okay, all. Yeah, each, every. Okay, very good. Lamed, the preposition lamed. To or toward. Very similar to the meaning of L. Odd is a preposition. All right. Anybody know?
Which one?
Odd.
As far as until.
Until. Yeah. Until. All right. Va. Vav.
And, but, thus, even.
Okay, right. Conjunction. Chai.
Life or living?
Very good. Life. Living. Yeled. Okay, very good. Boy or lad. Shemayim.
Heavens, sky.
Heaven or sky. All right. Adonai. Lord. All right. Bat. Daughter. Nice. All right. Lev. Kin.
Heart or will.
Okay. Very good. Adam. Man. Or Adam. Yisrael. Sean.
It's not Jerusalem. So Israel.
So see, they said Hebrew was going to be hard. Seuss.
Horse.
All right. Well, that's a good way to remember it. You can picture a Dr. Seuss book with a funny looking horse in it. It's too bad Seuss doesn't mean three-handled family Gradunzel. No, moss-covered three-handled family Gradunzel. Then we could remember it more easily. Isn't that what the Cat in the Hat used to clean up the house? The moss-covered three-handled family Gradunzel? Yeah, I know. See, that could be a couple of vocabulary words right there, and I'm hanging on to that for some reason. Seuss is horse. Eved? Servant. All right, good. Derek? Road or way, right? Good. Rosh.
Rosh is chief, top, head.
Nice. All right. Torah. Law. Okay, very nice. Those are worth 2 points apiece, obviously. So, take the number wrong and subtract it from 100. That's the total number possible. And if anybody's a math whiz, you might check my math on that, but it doesn't really matter. Just subtract it from 100. And the number right over 100. So we want the number right over 100. So let's say they missed 5. Subtract that from 100, that's 95. So put 95 over 100, and that will give us the grade.
Was there an extra point there somewhere? Extra 2 points?
Yeah, you got extra points for the alphabet and extra points for number 3, the endings. Just to make it come out to 100. Take 1 point off. Now, this is the kind of stuff, and not only the kind of stuff, this stuff in particular, this stuff in particular, there's probably a little bit of other stuff that you could put about on a par with this, but this is the stuff you need to know by now, right? So if there's any of this that you struggled with, you need to get it under your belt, because you need to know the stuff by now. You need to be knowing the alphabet and the vowels by now. You need to be knowing those noun endings by now. You need to be knowing the vocabulary very well by now. If there's one thing you can do, it's ace the vocabulary. Because that's just a matter of time, right? Because you can't say I didn't understand it, right? So, that's just a matter of putting in the time. There's one thing you can do. You can ace the vocabulary. If you put in gobs and gobs and gobs of time and you just can't get the vocabulary, I don't know what to tell you. Except, try to use mnemonic devices to memorize it. Use, Seuss. What do you have to think of? Dr. Seuss. Riding in on a horse with a bunch of books in his pack or something. I don't know. Whatever you have to think of.
And you can use it safer for books.
See, there you go.
Can I ask a question?
from a practical standpoint, on a lot of these that are, you've got 5 different definitions that seem to be all over the place. I mean, one of them was like with and against, which seem to be contradictory, but the word can mean both. Should we worry about memorizing every single one of these, or is there some kind of bigger concepts that we need to try to understand?
Well, you can look at it, and you can look at it, and how do you get with or next out of the same word? Well, it's probably the essential concept of being close to something, right? But just remember as many of those as you can. On a test, if you have one meaning, I'll take it. It's good. But when you're translating, the more of those you have in your mind, the easier it's going to be to translate. So try to.
The context should lay it out for you very well.
I think it's really important to understand that when you have a whole bunch of variety like that, it's trying to get it across the concept. I mean, we can't really get that word into English really well, so just getting the concept is the best.
Well, what about ones like that one word in the vocabulary, just like life, person, soul, neck syndrome, right, or something?
Neighbors.
Well, there's a lot of life in here. I mean, the
different cultures think of the seat of the personality in different places. In our culture, we think of the heart as kind of the center of the personality. Really take this to heart, right? Or know it by heart. Other cultures, in fact, there's a Greek word splankna, which means bowels, and so if your bowels, are feeling compassion, and that's kind of a concept in the New Testament. Other cultures think of the liver as being the seat. They use the word liver instead of heart, like we do. And the throat is another place where people look at the center of the personality in terms of physical body parts. So that would explain that. But nephesh means soul or a life. How many souls were lost on the Titanic? Right? So it's not entirely unlikely we even use the word.
And I thought my comments too. I think there was, there were, even prepositions, because there's some that are similar and some that are not even similar in the context of the word. And it's not probably unlike English, where you can have, that could be an example, soul and life, and then throat and neck. There is no relation, but they're combinations.
I think the biggest one that I had trouble with was like on some of the prepositions where it was with or against, which to me are completely contradictory. So, it's one thing finding a concept that kind of takes them all in, and I can understand the neck, throat, soul, life thing, but it's like the with and against.
Well, that's it. That's the way words. That's the way words work. The thing we're getting into, to a large extent, is taking a word and getting it into English, so that the English words don't have the same range of meaning as the Hebrew word. Is that camera on now? Yeah, good. When you're talking about vocabulary and the meaning of words, you have to think in terms of range of meaning. Excuse me, and I'll show you what I mean by that.
Erase the board.
Right, which I wasn't thinking about until you brought it up.
All right. Think of the English word. We talked about this in our Greek class. Think of the English word run. What does that mean? Run is going to have a whole range of meanings. Now, there's something outside that range of meaning that it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean sit, and a whole gobble of things. I mean, there's more outside than inside, obviously, right? But the English word run, well, what could that mean? Okay, a stocking could run. Somebody over here?
River could run.
Okay, a river could run. A river runs through it. That's my basement. No.
Work. Something runs, something works. Does that mean like something in that machine?
Okay, a machine can run.
Someplace you put a dog.
Pardon?
Someplace you put a dog.
Okay, you could use it as a noun, as a dog run.
Faster than walking.
Okay, so a person can run, an animal can run. You can have a milk run.
Your nose could run.
There you go, see? Your nose could run.
Food run.
A food run, yeah. All right.
Run a business.
Okay, you can run a business. So we can probably go on and have some more of those, right? And in English, that's all the word run. You know, why are you so tired? Well, it's hard to run a business. You know, why are you so tired? Well, I just ran a mile. You know, why are you so tired? Well, I've been trying to get my car to run. You know, now I think that at least most of the time, if not all the time, a word kind of has a central, kind of central meaning that the rest of them kind of come off of, right? And, to me, probably a person or an animal running, is the essential meaning of this word, and then it gets applied in different kinds of ways. You see what I mean? Semantics. Now, if I were going to translate the word run into another language, right, what would I use to translate the word run? Well, that might vary. If I have a sentence that says, I ran to the store, and I'm going to translate that into Swahili or something, right? What word would I use for the word ran?
As if you ran or drove.
Well, yeah, and that's it. You get into all of those kind of issues. But, I ran to the store to mean I drove. All right. I ran a big corporation. Now I'm going to translate both of those sentences into Swahili. There's a very good likelihood that this ran is going to be translated with a different word in Swahili than this ran. All right? Well, that's what we're dealing with in Hebrew. You can take one word, nephesh. What does it mean? It means nephesh if you're a Hebrew speaker. Right? What does run mean? It means run if you're an English speaker. But when you're trying to get nephesh into English, the uses of nephesh could represent more than one different English word. But it's helpful, I think, on a couple of levels to try to think, well, what could be the essential core meaning of nephesh? See? Well, it's probably soul. Right? Now, there might be a couple of meanings of a word that you can't really see how they relate together. And maybe they don't. That's possible. So it's always helpful to me, and some linguists, maybe most linguists, I don't know, would roll over in their office chair or grave or whatever, to hear me say that there's probably one core meaning to a word. But I think there is. I think common sense tells you that there is, and then that over time that word branches out, right, and gets used in various different ways. And so I think that helps us when we're trying to learn vocabulary, understand vocabulary. Helps us in exegesis when we're trying to interpret the Bible, when we're trying to translate Scripture or whatever. Now you hear sometimes preachers use the root error, they called it, where you look up in a dictionary and you say, okay, this word can mean 4 things, and so you make that word mean 4 things in your passage, right? Well, it probably only means one thing in your passage. You're gonna, if you see the word nephesh in Hebrew, it's probably either going to mean soul or life or something. Now, sometimes an author can get artful and use double entendre, and use a word in more than one meaning, and that's quite possible, and it happens in Scripture, But just because you look in your lexicon and see, oh, this can mean this or this or this or this, hey, that's 4 great points for a sermon. No, it doesn't work that way. You're probably going to have to choose one in the context, that works the best and run with that. So that's how vocabulary works. Yeah.
Could you use those other words to help try to get across the concept of the word?
Well, that's useful to know that, this word is used in this way, in this way, in this way. Certainly sometimes that can be helpful. If you were going to try to exegete the word run to somebody who wasn't an English speaker, and, it was used in a sentence like, I'm learning to run a business, and you mentioned that in English the word for run a business is the same as the word to run a race, that could be useful. But then if you said, and that's because it's a lot of work and tiring to run a business, just like it is to run a race, now you're probably abusing the idea of progress, and motion, purposeful motion that creates progress. Is probably the idea behind the word run. So if you look at it that way, and you said to somebody who wasn't speaking, to run a business means you're trying to, it takes activity and it's purposeful and it's for the purpose of, moving in a certain direction and making progress with the business. You can probably exegete that way and get somewhere with it. So understanding the way language works a little bit. Again, it's not enough, but you don't want to turn off your innate ability to do language. If you didn't have a natural, innate human ability to do language, and you had to just learn it all by logic and rote, it would be very, very difficult. We are wired to be linguistic creatures. See? Now, after we get to a certain age, and that's probably before 20, it gets difficult for us to learn languages. So all of us old people in this room, and that's all of us, we'll struggle a little more than you could probably put a 12-year-old in here. And if they were serious, well, forget it, they'd never be serious. But if they could be serious about it, they'd probably blow us all away. I know I think my daughter was about 3 or 4, and we're listening to these tapes trying to learn German. So when we went there, we could order a sausage. And she's just in the back seat of the car. We're struggling. What was that? Play that again. She's in the back seat, just whipping off these German phrases. We go, what? She's just in to pick up the language mode. At that age, and she's going to town with it. But you got to rely on your innate ability to do language to do this stuff, right? And so, think of and it's kind of interesting because it's so natural to us that we don't think about the process of language, right? But if you start thinking about how does English work? Well, Hebrew is not exactly like English, but it's a language, so they have some things in common. You see. Now, one of the things you need to realize is that there's never a one-to-one correspondence between two languages. So, a word in Hebrew, nephesh, will never have a one-to-one corresponding word in English, unless it's a loan word or something like that, right? I suppose taco in English means about the same as it does in Spanish, although probably taco in Mexico would be different than Taco Bell, I imagine. But you know what I mean, right? So the word nephesh, there's not going to be a one-to-one correspondence between that word and any word in any other language, probably. Unless it's a very close language, like Hebrew and Aramaic will have close, because they're very close languages. But Hebrew and English are not. They're not going to have a one-to-one correspondence. Yes?
I was going to ask a question on that. On the Indo-European languages, a lot of words will kind of have a little different variants, which is how they're related.
Yeah.
Is the same thing true in the Semitic languages?
Mm-hmm. Yep. The word for father in Hebrew is av. The word for father in Aramaic is av. And where you get Abba with Aramaic, did I tell you this before?
Yes.
Where you get Abba with Aramaic is, in Hebrew, the direct article attaches to the front of the word, and it's a hey with the dogged forte in the next letter. In Aramaic, the definite article attaches to the back of the word, and it's a hey with the dogged forte in the previous letter, right? So the dogged forte doubles the B of av and makes it hard, and so you get Abba. So instead of having a ha in Hebrew, you have an ah in Aramaic. So Abba is simply the Aramaic form of Ha'av in Hebrew. And you hear people say, well, what does Abba mean? Right? And they say that's what a little kid would say when their father got home from work. They'd run up to him and say, Abba. And that's true. But they make a jump that's not reasonable. Then they say, oh, well, so that means the same thing as what a little kid would run up to their father in America and say when he got home from work. So therefore, Abba means daddy, right? And so, when you see Abba in the Bible, it's the equivalent of daddy. Well, that's not true because, you're making a cultural equivalence between American culture and Middle Eastern culture. And it might be that there's a little bit less respect shown to parents in America than in Middle Eastern cultures. Maybe. Just maybe. Right? So if Abba means daddy, so does Ha'av, and it doesn't, right?
So father? So the father would mean, right? So it's a...
Mm-hmm. What?
I'm just trying to think. That was, Abba is the father, not...
Well, again, that's another thing that definiteness varies between languages. What you would expect to be definite in English may not be in another language. And we saw that in Greek all over the place. What you would expect to have an article in English doesn't in Greek sometimes, and vice versa. And even within English, it's that way. And the shining example to me is between American English and British English. They say that the Americans and the Brits are two people separated by a common language. And that's because it's both English, but they're different. So in America, if you're sick, you'll say, I went to the hospital. Right? In Britain, if you're sick, you say, I went to hospital. If you said, I went to the hospital, they think that was as strange as we think it is to say, I went to hospital. So definiteness, or the definiteness and the presence of the definite article are not fixed concepts like we think they are. Right? There was another one I thought of recently, and it's not coming to mind, where it's actually the opposite way. In England, there's a definite article, and in America, there's not. But I can't think of it now. So that's more of a fluid thing than you think it is. When you think about definiteness and definite articles and those sorts of things. In John 1, it says, in the beginning. There's no the in Greek, because the beginning is already definite, because how many beginnings are there? There's one. Right? But in English, you need an article there. You wouldn't say in beginning. You'd say in the beginning. You got a question?
I was just going to say that some languages have that.
Russian doesn't.
No.
I didn't know that.
I figured it out. And I went one time, and then got home, I got a note from the student that said, thank you for bringing me the God. And I thought about that. And when I studied Russian, I learned there is no definite article. That's why they put it there, even though we wouldn't. Because they were trying to be perfect.
Yeah, but they were confused about how to use a definite article.
Yeah. So that's the same kind of thing with running into everything.
Yeah.
How they use it versus how we use it.
Yeah. Well, part of the time in the New Testament, I don't remember the exact statistics, but part of the time, God is written with the definite article in the Greek New Testament. And part of the time, it's written without the definite article. And there doesn't really seem to be entirely a rhyme or reason why it's with or without the definite article.
Different writers.
Huh?
Different writers.
Different writers, but even within the same writer, it can vary. So, when you are learning a foreign language, you begin to learn something about the nature of language. And really, you'll never know English very well until you learn a foreign language, really. Figure out how language as a concept works a little bit, and allow your innate ability in language, which you have as a human being, to help you with the whole thing. You hear people talk about how they can teach apes to speak, and whether that's to communicate using language and stuff like that. However true that is, what you'll never find is an ape teaching an ape, except in seminary. But you never find an ape teaching an ape. to speak. I mean, it's something that maybe, sorry for the pun, but something that maybe they can ape, but they don't have that, same language ability that a human being has. You can have apes hanging around human beings a lot, and they're not going to come out talking. But you can take a baby hanging around a family, and they'll come out talking. And so there's just a big difference there. Okay, page 61, Hebrew adjectives. All right. He makes a pretty brave statement here in the beginning, and it's true as far as it goes. Hebrew adjectives function just like English adjectives. Well, in their basic functioning, that's true. It's really kind of interesting. Hebrew, in some sense, is more like English than Greek is like English. For example, in word order. Hebrew word order matters more like English word order matters. Now, I'm not saying Hebrew word order is always the same as English, but Hebrew word order matters like word order in English matters, where in Greek it's the case endings that indicate function. In English I can say Bob hit John, and if I reverse that, a different person gets hit. John hit Bob, right? It's like that in Hebrew. But in Greek I can put that in whatever order I want to, because I can just use an ending, case ending, to communicate which one's the subject and which one's the direct object. So adjectives in Hebrew are very much like adjectives in English. What does an adjective do? An adjective modifies or describes usually a substantive, which is a fancy word for noun to some extent. But a substantive really means something functioning like a noun. You can have things other than nouns functioning like nouns, can't you? For example, adjectives. So you can have an adjective used substantively. And that's true of Greek, that's true of English, it's true of Hebrew. You can have participles functioning like nouns too, can't you? All right, so the inflection of adjectives. It's kind of funny what he says. The bad news is adjectives are inflected. An inflection is like an infection. You want to have as few of those as possible. That means you just have to memorize something, right? The good news is the endings for articles are just like a simplified form of the endings for nouns. Or in other words, just like the endings that we just learned on our quiz for nouns. With less variation, for example, in the feminine singular. So again, blank, im, a, ot. That's the endings for adjectives. Isn't that cool? You already know those, right? So here's the word tov, good. Tov is masculine singular. Tovim, masculine plural. Tova, feminine singular. And tovot, feminine plural. All right? Now, what you need to know about adjectives, because we have endings, there is an agreement issue. Like Greek, same in Hebrew. So an adjective agrees with the word it modifies, usually a noun, in gender and number. So if your noun is masculine, your adjective is going to be masculine. Now, see, a noun typically is either going to be masculine or feminine. What is an adjective? Both. See? So if the noun is masculine, the adjective is going to have a masculine form. If the noun is feminine, the adjective is going to have a feminine form. If the noun is singular, the adjective is going to have a singular form. If the noun is plural, the adjective is going to have a plural form. They're going to match, right? Or you could even think of it as rhyming. Now, they might not always literally rhyme, because in the noun you could have, especially in the feminine singular, you could have various forms of the ending, right? The adjective endings are going to be more consistent. So if you have, as the example he gives there, sus tov. Sus is a masculine singular word, so it's going to have tov as an end, as a form for an adjective. A good horse. Excuse me. All right. The word queen, malka, is going to have the word, the form of tova after it, isn't it? Malka, tova. See how that rhymes? So since malka is feminine singular, tova is going to have a feminine singular ending after it.
How do you know what the noun is going to be as far as masculine and feminine? Is it just something more than memorize?
It's indicated by typically indicated by the vocabulary form. So if you have melech, blank ending, you can assume it's masculine. If you have Torah, ending, you can assume that's feminine singular. Now, are there exceptions to that? Yeah. Eretz, land, is a feminine word, even though it has not a typical feminine ending, right? Looks like it has blank.
The eames are masculine?
The eames are masculine, but that's not going to be in the vocabulary form, right? But if you see that in the text, if you see an eam, that's going to be a masculine plural. But, a noun that's masculine, if you make it plural, it's always going to be masculine plural. A noun, with exceptions, because you got, av in the plural, that's avot, right? But it's still a masculine plural, it just looks like a feminine ending. But that's an exception, that's an oddity, right? Typically, if you have a masculine word and you're going to make it plural, it's going to have that eam plural ending. If you have a feminine word, you make it plural.
I would assume that ish would be a masculine and isha, woman, would be feminine.
That's right.
But to just look at that word ish and to say, well, the sheen, does that make it a masculine?
No, the fact that it doesn't have an ending is consistent with it being masculine singular.
Okay. So the hey at the back of the word would always indicate it was feminine?
Well,
always?
As a rule. There are always exceptions to rules. Right? But yes, as a rule, that's true. So that's why we're looking at all of these, back here we had all these various feminine singular endings you could possibly have, because that indicates. If you look in a lexicon, it's going to tell you whether it's masculine or feminine, if it's a noun, right? It's going to tell you those things. But the good thing is that most of the time, you only have to really remember the exceptions. And again, it's not that important that you really remember it anyway, because if you have the word aretz, which is feminine, now if you're writing aretz and you're going to put an adjective with it, you have to know to put that in the feminine form. But you're not going to be writing it. You're going to see it in the text. When you see aretz with an adjective, the adjective is going to be feminine. And then you'll go, oh yeah, that's because aretz is feminine. But that's how it's going to work. So that's why they don't always rhyme, but normally they will rhyme. Does that make sense?
No. It's all right. I'll just keep reading.
Well, what doesn't make sense about it?
I just can't figure out how they would. I guess that hay would make it a feminine, probably most of the time.
Right.
And then if it's not a hay, then it's probably masculine.
Right.
Probably.
Well, unless it has like an ot ending or something like that. Like bot is daughter. That's a feminine word.
Right. Bet would be masculine.
Which one?
Bet.
Buy it?
Buy it. House.
I think that's masculine.
But you just have to know that. It's not something like you can understand. You just have to know.
At the end of the day, you just have to know whether it's masculine or feminine. However, there are very strong indicators that they're not foolproof. They're not always 100% reliable, but they're very strong indicators. If there's no ending on the end of the word, like buy it, you can assume it's masculine. Now, buy it's just the kind of word that could be feminine, so I want to make a commitment there. Huh?
Right? M for masculine.
Yeah. So you see buy it there? What's it say?
It says MSCSBR. I just looking at the.
Masculine. Okay, so we're safe on that one. So buy it, no ending, so that's going to be masculine. Torah, the ending, comet hey, that's feminine. Now, is it possible to have a word with no ending that's actually feminine? Yeah, and then one example is art. Is it possible to have a word with a feminine-looking ending that's masculine? That's possible, like avot, fathers. That's a masculine plural, even though it has an ot ending. But those are exceptions, right? Apart from the exceptions, if it has no ending, it's masculine, and therefore it would be pluralized with im. If it has an ending, or one of those other alternative endings, it's feminine, and will be pluralized with an ot. To be sure, you just have to know. But the way the text works is, if the text in the vocabulary, if the text gives you a word, we got a whole bunch of adjectives, not surprisingly, in this vocabulary list. But if the text gives you a word and it has no ending, then you can assume it's masculine. And if it's not masculine, they'll tell you this is a feminine word. If it has an ending or one of those other alternate endings, you can assume it's feminine unless they tell you otherwise. So that's the hard thing about language. The hard thing about language is it's used all the time. And so, people don't use things perfectly. And languages don't evolve perfectly. Right? So you can have all these rules or the way it typically is, but there's always exceptions, all the time. It's best to understand the basic principle and then try to deal with the exceptions. Right? So is everybody understanding the difference between masculine and feminine noun? And so now, usually the endings are going to correspond in the noun and the adjective. But what really corresponds is the gender. Right? So it's possible to have words that match in gender, but their endings don't correspond. Like aretz tova. Aretz is a feminine noun, even though it doesn't have an ending. So if I'm going to put an adjective, I have to use a feminine adjective, tova. See? So the most important thing is the gender of the noun, not the ending, even though those normally go together. If they don't, the actual gender of the noun trumps it. So the gender of the adjective is always consistent. You'll never have a masculine adjective that doesn't have a blank or an im ending. You'll never have a feminine adjective that doesn't have an or an ot ending. In the adjective, that gets to be perfectly consistent because they're changeable. They can go either way, right? But in the noun, it's usual, but it's not perfectly consistent. But what matters is if the noun is feminine, it has to have a feminine adjective. If the noun is masculine, it has to have a masculine form of the adjective.
So for reading it doesn't make any difference if we're trying to speak it.
Yeah.
Then we need to know.
Well, if you're reading it and you see haaretz, then you say, well, what in the world's tova doing there? Tova is a feminine form of that adjective. What in the world is it modifying? And if you're just not willing to remember that aretz is a feminine noun that has no ending, if you're just not willing to remember that, you're going to not know that tova modifies aretz, and you're not going to be able to translate it. I can't figure out what tova modifies.
So when we're learning these nouns, it really is it's important to remember whether it's masculine or feminine or every little thing about that noun.
Well, the thing to remember is the exceptions. There aren't that many exceptions. When you come across a word like aretz, remember it's feminine. It's an odd feminine word. It's just like in Greek. If you have an os ending, logos, that's second declension. The vast majority of second declension nouns are masculine, but can you have a second declension feminine noun? Yeah. So I'm going to remember that. I'm going to remember the nouns in the second declension that are feminine. I'm not going to memorize with every noun that it's masculine or feminine. I'm just going to remember the handful that are feminine. And if I don't remember it as feminine, I'm going to call it masculine. Right? Same thing with the first declension. The vast majority of those are feminine, but there are a few that are masculine. So I'm going to know the ones that are masculine. See, so hadas, second declension, feminine noun. So hey hadas. Mathetes, first declension, but masculine. So ha mathetes. Right? It's a similar thing. All right. We need to come back to that later. We will. All right. Page 62. The use of adjectives. Adjectives can be used as attributive adjectives. So the attributive use of the adjective, which means that it attributes a quality to the noun. So Ish Tov is a good man, or just good man, a good man. Ha-ish, Ha-tov is the good man. Notice, if an adjective is used as an attributive adjective and the noun has an article, the adjective has to have the article. Okay? That's good. Right? So the good man is Ha-ish, Ha-tov. If you have Ha-ish, Tov, that doesn't mean the good man. That means something else, which we'll know in just a minute. Right?
I'll say that one more time.
If you have the noun with an article and the adjective does not, then it's not an attributive adjective. It means something else. So if you have an attributive adjective and the noun has the article, the adjective also has to have the article.
If it's reflecting on the noun.
If it's modifying the noun. Okay? And vice versa. You can't have ish ha-tov either if it's an attributive adjective. So if one had the article, they both have to have the article if it's an attributive adjective. In other words, if the adjective is just describing a quality of the noun. You know, the good man, the good woman, the good man. Now, notice how the good women, tova is the feminine form there, right? See? The good men is going to be tovim. Anashim tovim. And nashim, now women, right, that's an odd plural. Nashim, that looks like it ought to be a masculine, right, because the im ending. But nashim, if it means women, that's not going to be masculine, that's going to be feminine, right? It's weird. On the words that you think would be strictest about following gender rules in the grammar and the spelling, they don't. Women has a masculine looking ending, and fathers has a feminine looking ending. You know, explain that to me, Lucy. You know, I don't know. All right, there's space for a phone number on that one. I don't know why. But the good women is Hanashim HaTovot. See, but even though Hanashim has an uncharacteristic feminine plural ending, right? It looks like a masculine plural ending. It's feminine plural, but it looks masculine plural. Even though that's the case, Tov has to have the typical feminine plural ending, HaTovot. See how that works? So if you saw Hanashim HaTovot, and you recognize Tov as an adjective, and you recognize the article with it, and you recognize that was the feminine plural form, because the adjectives don't have these exceptions, right? They're always consistent. So if you recognize that as the feminine plural form of an adjective, that tells you that Hanashim is feminine, doesn't it? Even though it looks like it might not be, we know for sure it is because the adjective is feminine. You see what I mean?
The adjective always directly follows what it's modifying?
Well, usually in the attributive use of the adjective, yeah.
Because if you don't initially recognize that as feminine, then again, what you're alluding to before is not knowing that that's what it's actually modifying.
Right. Yeah. But, you're probably not going to find anything else in that context that Tovot's going to work with. So, after a few minutes of being confused, you're probably going to be willing to remember, Nashim is feminine, and that goes together.
So the adjective follows the noun in the...
Usually, yeah. Okay, now, next, the predicate use. This doesn't work this way in English, but it's very similar to the way it works in Greek with predicate adjective, predicate position, predicate relation, those sorts of things. Right? In English, we always have to put in the verb, the verb to be, the equative verb, right? We usually don't get to leave out much in English, right? But in Greek, you can have a whole sentence and not even have an expressed verb. An unexpressed verb to be, or verb of being. And the same thing is true in Hebrew. Right? So if you have a noun and an adjective, and the noun has the article and the adjective does not, whatever order they're in, then it's a predicate use, and you have to supply a verb of being. So instead of the good man, it is the man is good. And this is actually, interestingly, the very same rule for determining predicate relation in Greek. If the noun has the article and the modifier does not, it's predicate relation, predicate position. All other cases, it's attribute. That's the Greek rule. Well, in here, it's the Hebrew rule too, pretty much. If the noun has the article and the adjective doesn't, predicate use of the adjective. Right? So you could have ha'ish tov or tov ha'ish. It means the same thing. The man is good. So that's really a complete sentence, isn't it? Still, however, the adjective, now it's a predicate adjective, but still the predicate adjective will agree in gender and number with the noun. Right?
Okay, so is the predicate just assumed?
It's just not expressed in Hebrew. Well, it's expressed by having the noun with the article and the adjective not. It's expressed in that way. It's just not expressed as a separate word like we would do. Yeah. So in English, you kind of have to supply the separate word. All right. And the third usage of adjectives is the substantive use, and it's the same as we have in English and in Greek. You can have an adjective used as a substantive, or and you can do the same thing with the masculine endings as well. Masculine pronominal suffix. You could say to him, lo, to him. Also, you can put that same pronominal suffix on the end of a noun, susa, and it means her horse. The horse of her. Her horse. Pretty exciting, huh?
Could you put the mom at the beginning of Susan, so it would be something like so-so and towards her horse?
La Susa, to her horse? Absolutely. But you don't need an article because when it's her horse, it's already definite, isn't it? So you're not going to put an article with that because it's already definite.
And with the directional ending, it's always translated to or toward, but sometimes it has an implied definite article, and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, it depends on the context, or the presence of an article. Look at the top of page 65. Buy it, house, or a house. Either one of those. Ha bayata, toward the house. You can go toward a house, or you can go toward the house. Yeah.
Not to be too picky, but did you just pronounce that wrong?
I don't think so. I think it's because it's a diphthong.
High by a top?
Well, oh, you mean accent-wise?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I probably got the accent right.
Because it's really important to
bayata.
know the difference
Yeah.
between the elements and the directional ending, right?
Yeah, well, but you know, bayat's not going to have a feminine ending on it. So, bayata. Yeah, so you want to put the accent not on the ending.
So basically, if we're seeing an accent and we're seeing that ending, we can pretty good chance that it's one of those directional endings.
Well, I don't know if I want to put my eggs in that basket. I'm not sure of the answer.
I'll just leave it that way in mind.
You can
You're just looking at two
leave it
heavens,
that way tentatively. Yes.
and that one has a definite article and a directional ending. But I guess that's kind of a special word since it's heaven, and there's only one heaven.
Well, all of those except Egypt and the last two have direct objects, definite articles.
Right. But it's actually, it's translated to heaven.
Oh, that's exactly an example of what we were talking about, where in Hebrew, you could put the article on heaven, but for us we wouldn't because there's only one heaven, so when we say heaven, it's definite already. Now, you can also make the other argument, it's definite, so you have to have the article with it. So, it's really, to a large extent, idiomatic when you need to use the article and when you don't. A lot of times it's
thought more for our benefit because it makes more sense in our language.
Well, that's an English translation. Yeah. I mean, sometimes we use to the heavens, but that's really a different meaning, isn't it? If we say to the heavens, that's slightly different than to heaven, probably. Because if we say to heaven, we're probably meaning the place where God is. If we say to the heavens, I mean, that could be the sky, that could be something probably. Which three? Well, three heavens, yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So, a lot of times, whether you have an article or not is optional, depending on what you're trying to communicate. Sometimes an article is needed, and sometimes an article is needed not to be there. So, like in English, if we're talking about heaven, we usually need not to have an article with that. Do you want to go to heaven? If you wanted somebody to say, do you want to go to the heaven? That would make good sense in English, right? But it may be, and in this example, I don't know if this gives us an idiomatic requirement in Hebrew, just because it's in this example. But it may be that in Hebrew, when you use the word heaven, actually Ha-Shemayim is usually how it comes out. So yeah, I think that is an idiomatic requirement. Ha-Shemayim is heaven. So you just have to be able to flex on the whole definite article thing. Did you go to hospital? That whole thing. Okay, so directional hey ending. All right, vocabulary then on page 66. Are you working in your workbook, by the way? Cool. All right. Say the word after me, and then I'll tell you what the English meaning is if you can't read it. All right. Echad. And did you get the? Because that's a chet, isn't it? Echad. One. Gadol. Gadol. Great. Dal. Dal. Poor. So there's a word for poor right there. Tax break for the doll, or for the Dalim, if you want to put it. Zakein. Zakein. It means old, or old man, or elder. How are you going to memorize that one? Old men don't go to their king. Well, that'll work, but I think it works better that old men might use zakein when they walk. Chacham. Wise. Tov. Good.
We have utmost confidence you can say it in English.
Yafeh. Beautiful. Yashar. Straight, right, upright, just. Cain. Thus, so. Ma'od. Very, exceedingly. Ma'at. A few, little. Ata. Now. Sadiq. Righteous, just. Kodesh. A noun, holy or holy thing. I was trying to think of how you could use holy as a noun. It's hard to think of how you, and I can see how you could use holy thing as a noun. But how would you use holy by itself in English, just as a noun? It's kind of interesting.
Isn't there a book called Knowledge of the Holy?
Yeah. I suppose in English I'd be thinking of that as an adjective used substantively, but I guess you have a noun to use substantively for that very purpose in Hebrew. You don't have to. Maybe holiness is such an important concept that you get a noun for it too. I suppose.
In English, it is holy.
Yeah, but that's an adjective again. That's a predicate adjective, isn't it? it is a holy thing. But in English, that's still an adjective. So it's interesting. He's the definition of that holy thing. He's still maybe that's because we don't have a noun. I get it now. That's because we don't have a noun in English for holy. It's just an adjective. But in Hebrew, they do have a noun for holy.
They have a separate noun for holiness.
Constant holy.
Yeah. That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't remember one. It's a good question. So the next word, kadosh, is holy is the adjective. Katon, small, insignificant. Karov, near, imminent. Kasheh, you might say in a sense used as a noun, right? Can you think of, I can, but I'm going to see if you can think of adjectives in English that we use as nouns sometimes.
Poor.
Okay. How would you use that in a sentence?
As a substantive.
Yeah.
In tax breaks for the poor.
Okay. We need tax breaks for the poor. Now, poor is an adjective, isn't it? You know, you could, a poor man. But I can use it by itself, and here's, I guess, in a sense in English where we're leaving off something, right? Tax breaks for the poor, I'm not saying the poor people, but that's what we mean, right? In Greek, remember, we use the example, give me you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor, you're huddled masses, you know, so tired, hungry, poor. Those are all adjectives used substantively. Well, you can do the same thing in Hebrew. All right, lexical form. The lexical form of a Hebrew adjective is always the masculine singular form. Now, what gender is an adjective? Just an adjective by itself. What gender is an adjective? Well, it's all of them. All right, it can be any of them. So, in the dictionary, the form you're going to find is the masculine singular form. A noun, what form do you find? You find the singular form of whatever gender it is. If it's a masculine noun, you're going to find the singular form of the masculine noun. If it's a feminine noun, you're going to see the feminine singular form of it. Right? But since an adjective can be any of them, both genders, both singular and plural, you're going to find the masculine singular form in the lexicon. All right?
Question, and we'll go back to substantive use. So you go back to substantive use, because really there's a noun that would follow it, and antecedent noun to
you could stick a noun on it, yeah.
But you don't.
You don't.
It's implied.
Right.
So do you use the question then is, do you use the masculine version in all those cases, or do you use what the noun would be had it been there?
The latter, yes. So if you're talking now, you know, we don't have endings in English, so poor, that's nondescript in terms of gender, isn't it? Right? But in Hebrew, if you were going to use a word for poor, and you're talking about poor women, that you'd put it in a feminine plural form. Or if you're talking about one poor man, you know, then you'd use a masculine singular. That's a great question. Now, typically, you're going to find it in the masculine because that's not only used for masculine uses, but it's also used for the generic use, both in Hebrew and in Greek. You know, you can get into a whole big, you know, thing in your mind about inclusive language and blah, blah, blah. But in the Hebrew Bible, you know, not only is the masculine used to be truly masculine, it's used to be generic as well. And that's the same in the Greek New Testament. So there is no his or her in Hebrew. I mean, I don't know, somebody might be able to find one, but I mean, that's not typical. There is no his or her in Hebrew Bible or in Greek New Testament. For the generic, you would simply use the masculine form.
I don't know if poor would be a good example, but if you were going to give something to poor women, could you just use the poor in the feminine?
You would.
Without women attached.
Absolutely. That's what you would do. And you'll see that too. You'll see an adjective used substantively, but it'll be plural, which tells you you're talking about more than one. maybe masculine, but it could be feminine. It could be feminine singular. It could be feminine plural, and then that tells you you're talking about just women, or if it's not people, if you're talking about a poor land or something, and land is feminine, then whatever the reference, if you had the noun there, whatever it would be, that adjective is going to match that in gender and number. Right?
So the noun could be included.
Yeah. And and what I was saying is that if the adjective refers to both men and women, or both masculine and feminine things, then the adjective will be in the masculine as the generic form. Yeah. Does that make sense? So you may see an adjective used substantively that is feminine plural. But as you would expect, most of the adjectives that you see used substantively are going to be in the masculine form. Why? Not necessarily because they only refer to men, but because that also serves as the generic form as well. So anytime you're referring to men and women, you're going to use the masculine form. Good. Yes?
Will there ever be situations where the adjective and the noun that it's modifying will be separated by the words, like in Greek?
I don't like questions that say, will there ever be, because
Is it common?
I think it would be unusual for you to find that. Now, I don't know that you would ever find it, because again, in Hebrew, word order is very significant. In Greek, you can do that because you're having matching endings, and you are with nouns and adjectives in Hebrew too. But how many endings do we have in Greek, and how many endings are we having in Hebrew? So in a sentence, I can spread the adjective modifying the direct object away from the direct object, because they're both going to be in the accusative, and I have 4 case forms to work with in a sentence, right? In Hebrew, I've only got genders and numbers. I don't even have any case endings, so it's going to get real confusing if I start separating my words a lot that go together. So you're not going to see that, not at all like you do in Greek. I'm not going to say it's not possible, but you're typically going to see them up against one another. Yeah, that's good. In that sense, Hebrew is a lot easier, just to make sense of, because you're going to have that word order kind of flow happen. Okay, that's a good question. Any other questions about adjectives? All right, now we'll throw in a little icing on the cake here. The directional hey, the directional ending. The directional ending, you simply, throw a comma's hey on the end of a word, and that is really equivalent to putting the preposition el on the front of it. To or toward, to the land. El haaretz, to the land. Artsah, to the land. Same thing.
And the comments are under the
Pardon me?
right? The comments say, the comments is under the zodi.
Sade? Yes. Yep. So the directional ending, it says it occurs 1,091 times in the Hebrew Bible. Obviously, there are certain words that are going to be more prone to have that directional ending. Places, right? So Bayit, here, Shemayim, Mitzrayim, Har, Sham, Yam, toward the house, toward the city, heavenward, to heaven, to Egypt, to the mountain, to that place, to there, to the sea. Now, very helpfully, he gives us all of the different possibilities for a comets hey ending. We've already learned that feminine singular nouns may end in comets hey. For example, Torah. That ending is accented. Feminine singular adjectives may end in comets hey. Gadolah, great, for example. The directional hey we just talked about. In later chapters, we'll learn that prepositions, nouns, and the definite direct object marker may take a third feminine singular pronominal suffix that consists of comets hey and that this time the hay is going to have a mapik in it. So lamed, comet's hay, that lamed is the preposition, to. And that third feminine singular pronominal suffix is her, a pronoun, right? Pronominal suffix is a pronoun suffixed to the end of a word. See? Remember I said we're going to be hanging stuff all over everything, right? So now you get to take the lamed preposition and just put a comet's hay on the end, and it not only means to, but to her. See? Difficult? Rachok. Remember that's a chait there. Rachok. Far, distant, or distance. Now see, there's where we have in English distant as an adjective and distance as a noun. Holiness, a noun of quality, isn't it? All right, Rav. Much, many. Ra. Evil, wicked. That's a geminate adjective there, isn't it? Resh, ayin. Rasha. Wicked, guilty. And sheer. Song.
That same as gate,
Gate is seer, I think.
Sha'ar.
Oh, sha'ar. There's a. Yeah,
When
there's
you
a.
leave, you have to remember to sha'ar gate.
I remember that one.
It doesn't work for you, that's all right.
If you don't sha'ar gate, the cows will know. I thought somehow it was tied to sing. I was like, no, how's that sing?
That will never forget that, will we? That's pretty funny. Okay, good. Make sure you read these kind of little insightful, I don't know if you call them devotional things, kind of they are. They're pretty nifty. Pretty interesting stuff. All right, any questions on that chapter? This is an easy week. We only have to do one chapter. All right, before we go, let's take our Bibles for a moment. Yeah, just keep it running.
Now they know me.
I don't know if you want to put it